Hi guys, it's John from LookSmart Home Inspections right here in New Jersey. And I want to talk to you today about some of the electrical defects that New Jersey home inspectors will find when they're inspecting the home that you're thinking about buying. Some of these are going to be more important than others, but it just kind of gives you a flavor of some of the things that your New Jersey home inspector is going to be looking at when they inspect the electrical system in your house. And it's very, very important to do so because we want to make sure that there's no fire hazards and no electric shock hazards and no electrical safety issues inside the home that you're thinking about buying, to the extent at least we can. So the first thing we look at, and what I look at, is how large a service size the electrical is in the home. Is it 100 amps? Is it 150? Is it 200? Or is it less than 100, which would be very rare. Very rarely do you come upon any more an electric service in a home that's under, 100 amps of service. So there's nothing inherently wrong with having a 100 amp electric service. So we want to make sure that we have ample electrical ability in a home. So we want to make sure that we can run the material, the systems in the house from the service size that we have. And that's one of the things that I look at, when we have a smaller electric service, like a 100 amp service, is what am I serving from this 100 amp service? Now, 100 amp service, serving a home that doesn't have any, large electrical draw appliances, is you're going to be much better off per se than 100 amp service, servicing a home with, say, like an electric car charger, or an electric water heater, electric dryer, electric range, right? So, there are certain things, like if we have a lot of electrical needs in a house, we'll look at that, and I'll typically say, it's really time to upgrade this service to a 150 or 200 amp service, depending on what we're actually running off the electrical in the home. Having an electric service size of 100 amps back in the day was okay because, we didn't have a lot of these, high draw electrical appliances. But now we do, and we have modern lifestyles. There's a lot of electronics, there's a lot of systems. There's multiple, sometimes in these larger homes, HVAC units, electric dishwasher, electric water heater. So it all kind of plays into the electric service size. Is that electric service size big enough? Now, as home inspectors, we don't get into load calculations and, that type of stuff. But, a seasoned home inspector is going to know, what, as we're going through the home and seeing the systems, what kind of electrical draw is on that smaller service size. So generally, we want to recommend that, for an average size home, we have a 150 or 200 amp electric service at this point in time, because that'll give our client the ability to run really everything that they need to do. And having a 100 amp service side is a little bit on the small side of things, at this point. New Jersey home inspectors are also going to take a look at the electrical panel box and make sure that electrical panel box is not manufactured by one of the companies that really has a poor reputation in the business and is actually out of business. Now, we still come across these panels. Take, for example, Federal Pacific Electric, Zinsco, Bulldog Pushmatic panels, Sylvania panels. They are still out there, but not as prevalent. So when I first started home inspection 25 years ago, we would find these panels all the time. But now it's becoming less and less, which is actually a good thing because it's certainly safer for you, the home buying consumer. But a home inspector here in New Jersey is going to make sure that that electrical panel box is not, manufactured by one of the manufacturers that has a really poor, safety record. So Federal Pacific, definite safety issues. Zinsco, safety issues. Pushmatic, Bulldog, safety issues. And Sylvania, to some extent, safety issues too. So we're going to make sure that you don't have that. And we'll always recommend an electrical panel upgrade for sure if you have one of these, one of these older panels for sure. And insurance companies are becoming stricter with what they require as far as electric. I think the minimum for sure in any dwelling unit would be a 100 amp service. They don't want to see anything, less than that typically from what my experience has been. But, they're going to look for things. They're going to want to know what type of electrical system you have in the home. Is it very old? Is it knob and tube? Do you have any aluminum wiring? Any unsafe modifications? Any amateur work? Any unpermitted work in the home? So be aware that your insurance company is very, very strict right now. And they're doing this all over New Jersey because they've taken a lot of claims. They've taken a lot of hits. And they certainly want to make sure that, the house that they're insuring doesn't really have a tremendous amount of underlying electrical defects, which can cause injury or fire. So when you do that, make sure that you talk to your insurance company about, the major electrical issues in a home. Take, for example, one of those suspect panels, aluminum wiring in the home, knob and tube wiring in the home, a lot of amateur work, those type of things. One of the things that a lot of agents ask me is when I'm doing my panel inspection is that, are there any double taps? And I'm thinking, I say yes or no, whether it's a very common defect, a double tapped circuit breaker, which is two wires on one circuit terminal, like two wires connected to one breaker. And the reason why that's important is because we don't want to have a problem where that breaker doesn't trip or one of those wires becomes loose, especially if it's two different sizes. Take, for example, if it's one is a single strand conductor and then one is a different size conductor, electrical energy going through those can cause a problem with arcing and maybe a failure of the breaker. So double taps is something that we definitely look for when we look inside the electrical panel box, but by no means is it the only thing, Many times the agents will say that, is that the only thing that, I'm looking for a lot of different things, in the panel box, but for some reason, they just want to say, are there any double taps? That's, the end all of the panel inspection. And it's certainly not. It's just a very common defect. And I guess that's what sticks in their mind. But there's so much other, problems that can happen in a main electrical panel. And of course, one of them is, the double tapped wire. And one of the things that we're certainly going to be looking for when we do your home inspection is aluminum wiring, right? And I've talked to this on videos, but aluminum wiring is a major safety concern. Insurance companies don't really want to insure homes with aluminum wiring because of the safety concern. Aluminum wiring is really hard to fix unless you rewire the whole house. There are some fixes, and sure, you can try to, pigtail, purple wire nuts, do that kind of fix. But really the best fix is to rewire the house at a great expense. So that's a really important defect that New Jersey home inspectors are going to be looking for, is the presence of single strand conductor aluminum wiring in the home. And that's very, very important. And this is, really took place in the late 60s to sort of the mid, 1970s was this wire more prevalent. Now listen, most of it has been removed and replaced or corrected, most of it. But, we still find those pockets in New Jersey where the developments do have, aluminum wiring. And it's very important for your home inspector to be cognizant of that. And that's one of the things that's super important. And, we're going to be looking for that. And another thing we do is we check a sample of the electrical receptacles in the home. And what is a sample? It's really a representative sample size of those. I try to test the majority of the electrical receptacles in a home. Just so, because the one I don't test, that's going to be the one with the problem, right? The one I couldn't get to, that's going to be the one with the issue, right? That's going to have the reverse polarity or the ungrounded receptacle. So one of the things we look for is proper grounding of the electrical receptacles. It's a very simple thing. We just really want to make sure that the electrical receptacles are as safe as they can be. And we're looking for that. We want to make sure that it's grounded and it doesn't have reverse polarity or open grounds, open neutrals. So we have an electrical tester to do that. And of course, we're going to make a note of that if those things come up in the report. We want that when you plug an appliance or a system inside, your home, a lamp, what have not, you want to make sure that I want to make sure that that's safe to do so. And we are testing the electrical receptacles as we go throughout the house for sure. That's, super important. Another thing that we're trying to do, not trying, but we always do as New Jersey home inspectors, is to look for the presence of ground fault circuit interrupter receptacles in kitchens and bathrooms, exteriors, in garages, unfinished basements. There's a lot of requirements regarding where these electrical receptacles should go, and we want to make sure that they're in the right place, that they are present. And what they do is they meter current going in and out of the electrical receptacle. And if this receptacle senses a very, very minute issue with the current going in versus the current going out, it's going to trip and it's going to cause a fault. And it's going to help prevent you from getting shocked. And this is really important or worse actually, this is really important to have in kitchens and bathrooms. We just want to make sure that the home is fully equipped with GFCI receptacles, where needed. It's definitely, if you don't have them and you're buying an older home, it's definitely a nice upgrade to have for sure, just for safety. One of the things that I've come across a few times in my home inspections are, electrical wiring that's been damaged by rodents, right? And, for some reason, I find a lot of rodents in homes, droppings in houses. So I know that there's rodent activity. But one of the things that rodents or mice really like to chew on is electrical wiring, especially that older cloth-style wiring in a home from the 50s and 60s. And I do find a lot of issues with this type of wiring that's been chewed by rodents. And this happens typically in the attic space. And that's something that you guys should keep your eye out for, other New Jersey home inspectors, is rodent damage wiring, because they really like for some reason to gnaw on this wiring, and we don't want to have a fire or electric shock hazard develop because they're just going to town on the electric wiring in the home. So that's super important as well. And another thing we're going to be looking for as New Jersey home inspectors with the electrical system in the home is amateur electrical wiring. So many times we go into a house and there'll be, amateur electric circuits. And we'll know this because, electricians usually do really nice, neat work. And, the wiring looks professional. But amateurs, they tend to do things kind of in a, slap it up kind of way. And they don't support it well. Open splices, wires going through, the basement metal studs without protection, open junction boxes, just crazy things in the electrical panel box. So we want to bring this to your attention, of course, because anything electrical is a, life safety issue and a fire hazard. So any amateur wiring that a home inspector comes up with in the home or looks at, views in a house is going to come up on your home inspection report. And we're going to explain that to you that, hey, this wiring is less than professional and you really should, get this corrected by a licensed electrical contractor so you don't have a fire and shock hazard, later on down the road. We'll find a lot of unsupported wiring in houses where they'll just be draped, wiring on piping, wiring on ductwork, just kind of laying up there. wiring on suspended ceilings, just laying up there, wiring just draped down in mechanical rooms, being used as, clothes hangers, stuff like that. So those are also things that your New Jersey home inspector is going to be looking for sure, is to look for any of this unsupported wiring. And for some reason, I just find a lot of it in basements, for some reason in attics, crawl spaces, people just left the wire, sort of go, and it's just loose, on the floor. We're also going to be looking for loose wiring connections inside the panel box. We're going to be looking for singed wires or anything that's sort of a safety hazard in there. I like to go into the panel box and I like to touch each wire just to make sure that it is nice and secure and it's not, loose under its screw for the breaker. Also like to check, throughout the house and just notate any open junction boxes or loose wiring that I have found inside the home. Several times, many times we'll find live wiring either outside of the home or inside of the home, that's still live and just hanging loose and open, which is a significant safety hazard. And you don't really want to have wiring just open in the basement, crawl space, attic, or even in the living space, because what if somebody hits a breaker and that wire becomes live suddenly? So we don't want to have that. That we call out also as a safety issue. We want to make sure that, we don't have any exposed, live wires where a person can, come into contact with it. And the next thing we look at is open electrical wire splices. And this is also kind of ties into the amateur wiring. For some reason, people just want to splice everywhere, just different kind of, they want to run light over here or appliance over there, and they'll just tie in anywhere to the electrical service, and it'll just be an open splice just in the air with maybe a little electrical tape around it. And that's a safety hazard because somebody can get into that, inadvertently touch that and become injured. Or there can be a fault in there or an arc in there in that bad splice because the wires are loose, and then you can have a fire hazard. So one of the things that we're going to be looking for sure is those funky, wire splices. And a lot of times I'll find these wire splices above a suspended ceiling, typically in a basement. So I remove, if I can, or push aside a few of the basement ceiling tiles just to look above there, because I've found so many wiring defects up there, especially if there's lighting in the basement and there's a suspended ceiling. I would say, 70-80% of the time, if you take and remove that electric, that suspended ceiling and push it to one side and look above that ceiling, most of the time you're going to see some open wire splices up there and some amateur electric work to those light fixtures. So it's something that I think we should do as New Jersey home inspectors, is to just, if possible, without causing damage, is to look at above those suspended ceilings, because there's generally so many issues up there. Another thing that we look for is unprotected wiring. We don't want a child or an adult for that matter to come into any contact, with wiring, say that's run in a closet, under the kitchen sink, on the exterior of the house, in the deck area. That should be fully protected. And your home inspector is going to be looking at those areas and calling them out as a safety concern if that wire isn't protected. Number one, we want it not exposed to the weather, especially if it's outside. And number two, we just don't want to have a person come in contact, with that wiring, or a child who, starts yanking on that wiring or starts to, sort of play with that wiring. I think that's very, 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 very important to do that. One of the things that we find a lot here in New Jersey, I find a lot for some reason, like probably a few times a month at least, is corrosion inside the electrical panel box. So we don't want to have moisture inside our electrical panel box. That is an absolute no no bueno idea, because we have, that electric and water just don't mix. So we have rusting inside the panel box. Typically, that's coming outside from the weatherhead. Moisture is entering the weatherhead or the splice area, and also where the main electric service wire enters the electric meter pan. That's another suspect area too, because that duct seal or putty on there is generally cracking and in poor condition. And then we'll go and open the panel box, and then we'll see a lot of corrosion on the breakers, on the terminals, and on the bottom of the panel box. So if we do see this, we're going to most likely ask you to have that further evaluated by an electrical contractor, because an electrical contractor can actually remove the breakers and take a look at the bus bars and to see if anything's really compromised, with corrosion and moisture behind the breakers. So that's really important. We never want to have moisture, obviously, in a electrical panel box. The next thing that we come across a lot in homes is extension cords stapled to ceilings, used as, permanent electrical wiring. So we'll run an extension cord for the back of the garage. We'll run it all the way to the garage door opener and, call that permanent wiring. That's really no good. So a home inspector here in New Jersey is going to be looking for areas of extension cords used as permanent wiring. We see this all the time, a lot of times in workshop areas and garages and, sheds, that type of thing. And we want to make sure that the electrical wiring for sure in the house is safe. So don't use your extension cords as, a permanent wiring. Another thing that I come across a lot is recessed lighting that is non-IC type recessed lighting. And recessed lighting we shouldn't have insulation covering or around the hi-hat cans as we view them from the attic if they're not able to do so. So what I like to do, I try to find the back of the can, I try to pull back the insulation, I take a picture, I come back, and I do a little research on the manufacturer and the model number of that particular hi-hat can light, and to see if it's okay to have insulation that close to it. Many of these can lights can't have insulation around them because that builds up heat and can become a fire hazard. So one of the things that I look for and these are very, very super popular, is that when we have can lights and we can view the back or the canister of these lights in the attic, is to make sure that, this is safe and we have the proper clearances from the insulation and the can light if they are not IC type can lights. So that's very, very important too. We're certainly looking for knob and tube wiring, and I find this a lot in older homes, 1920s, 1930s. We find this type of wiring even today still active. Even today, improperly spliced into modern wiring. And, insurance companies don't like knob and tube wiring. It's an ungrounded type of wire. At this point in time, it's very brittle. We don't want it touching any insulation because that can create a significant fire hazard. And so we're going to be looking for these knob and tubes inside the home and confirming that we don't have any visible knob and tube wiring. But that's the catch. If it's an older home, and just because we don't have anything visible doesn't mean that knob and tube wiring doesn't exist. And a lot of time that knob and tube wiring will go to wall light fixtures or sconces. And a lot of times that knob and tube wiring, will go to the lower baseboard electrical receptacles. So as home inspectors, we're not permitted to dismantle any electrical work. So I can't remove the light fixture. I can't open the electrical receptacle. But, be cognizant of that. If you are buying an older home, and it doesn't have visible knob and tube wiring, doesn't mean that you don't have any knob and tube wiring, certainly in the walls. So that's kind of just a real brief overview of some of the things that us New Jersey home inspectors are going to be looking for as far as electrical, wiring in the home. And it's really important. Now, for the most part, these electrical defects are easily to be rectified. The majority of them are not major problems. Sometimes if you get 20 or 30, that kind of snowballs, and then that can be, kind of a bigger electrical situation. So anyway, I hope this helps somebody, but I just wanted to kind of give you guys an idea of what we're looking for, in the electrical in a house, old house, new house. So I'm John from LookSmart Home Inspections, performing home inspections all over the state of New Jersey. And thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.